And boom, according to that, I am live. Welcome. This is Tokyo Tonight. My name is Hiko Simon. Same time every week, 10:30 p.m. Japan Standard Time. People still rocking, and I only set this up a few minutes ago. Hope you're having a good weekend. If you're in Japan, I hope you're having a good long weekend. We have Keiro no Hi, what was it? Yeah, respect for the Aged Day tomorrow. So we have a long weekend. So that's something nice. Yeah, hope everyone's doing good. Just realized that screen capture scope is a bit weird. I feel tempted to fix that, although you know what happens when I start doing technical stuff during the show. Let me see if I can fix that live. I can fix that live, no problem. Let's move that over there, let's stretch that out there, boom. Maybe do that and make it a little bit bigger. Oh, sorry, just wanted to make sure it was fitting. It's a bit off, but yeah, that'll do. Anyway, not a lot of topics tonight, although I've said that the last 2 weeks, and we still went over, so we do that. So remember, as always, do what Andrew Moboy just did right there, and say Hiko Simon, and it will flash orange. And if you do that, I will, in between each story, I'll just flash back. I will check who's trying to get my attention with a comment or with a question or a topic, and I will totally do those. I will do that again tonight. It's always more fun when it's interactive. A lot of news going on. I suppose there's stuff outside of the scope of what I'm planning to talk about. There's stuff I find interesting, like the submarine deal with France getting screwed over by America for the submarines with Australia, the whole UK, Australia, the defense pact with the US that's upset China and so on. Again, it's kind of funny. Japan totally wants to be in those, and there is a bit of relevance to that in the sense that there's the prime minister election going on, and the most sort of pro-defense person within that is talking about wanting to put like American nuclear missiles in Japan, all that sort of thing, just to show how with the team she is. So there's all that sort of thing. It's all sort of intertwined, but I'll only talk about those if people are interested. I'll give you the general updates on what's been going on. It's been lovely weather today. We are actually heading into, well, apart from of course the typhoons, we had Typhoon Cthulhu this week. It was something else, but I can't remember the names properly. And seriously, that's what it looked like to me. That's just what my brain said. It was Typhoon number 14. I like numbers. I mean, numbers are actually, there's no racism, there's no sexism. There's no association of women destroying and taking lives and so on like they used to do with hurricanes. Just give it a number. It's fairly neutral. But yeah, if you're going to have them, I must admit, Cthulhu is a pretty good name for a disaster. So yeah, we had a typhoon the other day. But apart from that, when we're not having typhoons at this time of year, it's actually getting to be lovely. It was like 27 degrees today, which is like perfect. I went for a long run lately on the weekends. It's partly, I think I mentioned this before, as a running challenge at work. Been trying to add up kilometers, so I started adding the Palace Run onto like the far end of a 12k run that I've been doing every weekend, which makes it like an 18k run. I did that again today, but I went super slow, and I use this. My Withings watch only needs to be charged like once a month, and it can monitor my heart rate when I'm running and my time. So it's actually, it's awesome. It's better than those. I got a Samsung smartwatch, but you had to charge it every day. It was just such a pain. I didn't want to do that. So yeah, the Withings watch is pretty rad. And anyway, I went and did that today. And while I'm running, I can check that I'm keeping my heart rate like below 150, so I'm not pushing too hard. So I'm not wearing myself out or doing anything to make myself feel crappy the rest of the week. And yeah, I've gotten kind of comfortable doing like. I actually ran 300 meters short of a half marathon last week. This week I cut it a bit shorter than that. The thing is my feet get a little bit sore, but still it's pretty cool that I can do it. It makes me think that, hey, maybe I could even, I guess with a marathon, yeah, I can see what it would be. It wouldn't be my capacity to do it. It would just be the pain in legs and stuff like that would happen. But yeah. Anyway, it's funny. I've actually, just for work reasons, I've actually set up a clock right in front of me right here with Pacific time. I'm pretty sure no one on Pacific time would be watching right now as a result. However, I can see at 6:30 a.m. I think Eastern time is like 3 hours ahead, right? So it's like 9:35 a.m. I think on the eastern coast of America, and throughout the day. So I guess you're either waking up or you're coming to join. But yeah, let's. In fact, let's just do one other thing. I want to turn off the aircon in here. Where did I put the aircon remote control? One sec. can't find it. So I just manually redirected it so it's not blowing on the mic. But anyway, yeah, that's how organized I am. Yeah, hope everyone's good. Anyway, let's check out, see who's in the comments. Kerberos Tenshi, you got here first. Indeed, you are first. And Sergeant Bilker, you are second. Congrats to you. Aaron, the moderator, made it. Hey, hey. Who else we got here? We got Andrea Moboy, as always, good to see you. And school holidays there in Melbourne. So, woohoo, indeed. Yeah, long term, I can believe you. A Devoid, good to see you, Devoid. Good morning. Who else we got in here? We got Dushyant Awana. I hope I pronounced it. What should I say? Dushyant Awana. Love the name, and always nice to see a new name. So I do appreciate you saying hello. And remember, like I'm saying to everybody, you can ask, say Hiko Simon, make it flash up orange on there for me so I can see. And if you do that, yeah, I will take questions, comments, topics, anything like that. Good to have you in here. Temiko, good to have Temiko in here. Good morning. What am I talking about? It's good evening. That's right. And you're from, though you're not in New Zealand. So yeah, good to see you. We've got, I am rambling a little bit at the moment. Believe in yourself. Good to see you, and greetings all. Sainted Sir, 9:36 a.m. on the East Coast. Well, there we go. Quentin Rankid, good to see you. We've got everyone in there. Japan could build a modern version of their is that the Soryu class, the I-13 submarine aircraft carrier? Oh, no, that's not the Soryu at all. That's the old World War II one. With the F-35, that would be quite interesting. Yeah, it's kind of fun. I mean, the fact that Japan, Japan has this kind of contorted idea. It doesn't actually have a military. Japan has a self-defense force, which is constitutionally, it's clearly prohibited from having air, sea, and naval military forces. But so instead of that, it has a self-defense force that can only defend itself. And they basically try to make everything in a forced way look like it's only for defensive purposes. And it did raise everyone's eyebrows when Japan built a ship that looked a lot like an aircraft carrier. It was just basically an enormous flight deck, a flat flight deck on top of a huge boat. They pointed out that, hey, there's no tilted runway. You can't take off planes from it. So we're just going to use it for helicopters, and it'll be for civil defense help and stuff like that. And then they went and bought a whole bunch of F-35s that can take off vertically. So yeah, of course, it was totally an aircraft carrier. In terms of a submarine aircraft carrier, I think that's just excessive. But yes, Japan could certainly do that if it wanted to. So yeah, anyway, it's kind of, other than, I suppose, with the Prime Minister election coming up, and that's very much shaping up, at least in terms of the polls, as being Kono's race to lose. Although interesting, because there are two women candidates in it. It's basically it's come down to the final four, and the election will be on this Friday, I believe. So we should know by the time I do the show next week, Japan should have a new Prime Minister, who I'll be surprised if it's not Taro Kono, but we'll see. But honestly, not a lot of interest there. The opposition's desperately trying to, come up with things to seem relevant to avoid Jimito taking away the LDP, taking away all the news. But Kerberos Tenshi, so does Germany. They were fighting, yet they were fighting in Afghanistan. Although Germany doesn't pretend to not have a military, though, right? In fact, I believe Germany has national service, right? They actually have conscription, which is interesting. So yeah, I'm sure it's being in Afghanistan was complicated for Germany, but yeah, still not possible for Japan. But anyway, yeah, that's actually kind of relevant to one of the topics I picked out tonight. So let's dive in. Let's get started. Remember, as always, if you remember to like, if you do like the video as we go through, subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet, and let's dive in. And please just give me topics and questions. I'm happy to riff off. There isn't a lot going on at the moment. So the first thing I found interesting was at the start of the week that in spite of the Prime Minister resigned because he was making the government, the Liberal Democratic Party, so unpopular. And yet for all of that, the NHK Party poll, the latest one this week, what's kind of happened is the new internal LDP election for a new Prime Minister, which is happening because the Prime Minister was so unpopular. It's actually taken up the full news cycle, and people are thinking, oh, it might be someone interesting now. So this is the ranking of political parties, and it's kind of the way that it always is, but it kind of goes to show how Suga falling on his sword literally is kind of saving the party with a national election in November. The one up the top, Jimin 37.6, that's the LDP, and they went up 4.2%. And their coalition partner, the Komeito, is the third place, 3.6. They went down slightly, but I mean 0.1 doesn't really make much of a difference. But they are the coalition with the government. And the leading opposition party, who you'd think with the Prime Minister resigning in shame over lack of popularity, they're at 5.5% support among the public, and that's down 0.9%. So they lost like nearly like 20% of their support, at least on this poll. Although there again, given that they're polling in the mid-single digits, honestly, I mean, you're getting into the the realm of statistical errors as it is anyway, and they are the most popular opposition party. Of course, they are cooperating with the fourth place party. They're 2.9%, the Communist Party, which is at 0.4%, which is quite low even for them. They're normally kind of stable around, around sort of 5 to 8%. They've got people who always, I think what makes the difference is that in the national elections, there's often quite low turnout. Only about 30% turnout, but just like the Komeito voters in fourth place, in third place there, and the communist voters in fourth place, those are the voters of those parties always turn out and always vote. So they've basically got it kind of like a fixed constituency. People who, you don't get many people that decide to vote for communists who don't vote for communists in other elections, but they're pretty loyal about coming out, so they secure a lot of seats. The party down the bottom there, Ishin, that's the Osaka party. That's the "we want to make Osaka awesome again" party. They're in the opposition, but frankly, they'd probably just hang out with anyone who would agree to be friends with them. 1.1%, down 0.6. So basically, the LDP, just by deciding to change its leader, has taken up all of the, they've actually taken support away from all the already single-digit opposition parties. And on the left-hand side, just for what it's worth, the Kokumin Minshuto, that is the other half of what would be the Democrats, the Tachimin, the second-ranked party. They split in two because they kind of didn't want to be in the same club. Shaminto, the old socialists, they are still hanging in there at 0.6%. They are almost irrelevant. They've fallen apart. They used to, although a lot of members of Tachimin, the main opposition party, started out in Shaminto. In the Social Democrats Party, but again, they're the Socialist Party, and they used to be friends with North Korea, so that didn't really work out well for them. Although so since then, pretty much they've had no support. Then there's Reiwa Shinsengumi, that's just basically based up 0.2% to 0.4%. At this point, what is even the point? And N-to the final one, 0.2%, no change. That's the people that don't want to pay their NHK fees party, which do you think would actually get more? They actually did get a seat in Parliament. They have polled higher than that. The problem is, it turned out whenever they talked about anything other than not paying the broadcast fee in Japan, they talked about invading Russia and doing all sorts of other crazy stuff, which just turned out that they were, they actually talked about how genocide would be justifiable under certain circumstances, and we should invade Russia, and I'm pretty sure that that 0.2% is sarcastic. The final one, however, of course, you might think, but wait a minute, Hiko, it's actually not the most popular party. Look, there's a party down the bottom there, 40.2%. They're losing a bit of support there, but they are far ahead of the pack. They're the ones who are going to have the control of power in the next election, and you would be correct about that. They are the percentage of people that don't want to vote for any of these parties because they think they are all doofuses, and that is 40.2% of the population. And even that's gone down because of the whole leadership stuff with the LDP happening right now. So probably showing my age, but there's a 1980s, God, it might even be 1970s. I saw it when I was a kid in the 80s, but I think it was from the 70s. The movie called Brewster's Millions, Richard Pryor, where he's given again, in probably 1970s money, he's given $10 million or something and told he has to lose it. So he tries to figure out ways to sort of waste money, and one is that he runs an election campaign, and he realizes partway through that it's all going to go wrong because he's becoming too popular and he might actually win. And so he decides to run an election campaign that he cannot win. So he decides to campaign for people to vote none of the above. And that is the Richard Pryor party there, 40.2%, none of the above. That is what most people in Japan support. They don't like the communists. They don't like the Democrats. They don't like the, definitely not a Buddhist religious sect party. They don't like the LDP. So that's kind of where we're at. There's not a lot to get excited about, but people are following because of that. And it's kind of crazy for everything happening. There they are, the LDP up 4.2%, even though everybody hates their guts and they have like they actually had in some polls 70%, even in like the NHK. I think the current government has a 60% disapproval rate, one of the highest disapproval rates ever. And yet, when it comes to, which party do you support, it still is 37.6% them, which is 7 times more than, the opposition. So that's what's happening with politics at the moment. And and in spite of that, in spite of all the drama, him simply resigning seems to be doing the business for them. Brewster's Millions. Did I not say Brewster's Millions? I meant to say Brewster's Millions. That is indeed the movie, Quint Ranked. You hit it there. So into the comments. Is that the name of the old film with that story? That is the name of it. It's a great movie. They should make it. That's a movie that could be remade. That obviously have to scale the money involved, but it would be actually really great to do again. Gilded Nerd. Good to see a Gilded Nerd. Let's check out who else is in here. Yes, a few comments there, but good to have you in here. And boom, that is the Kubris Tinci. Germany still only has a self-defense force and would depend on NATO to defend their country. The draft is only voluntary. Oh, I thought they had national service there. Okay, I'm sorry, I made the mistake. It used to be mandatory until the early 2000s. There we go. So that is super interesting. Anyway, next story. Let's just jump in. So I'm a little bit stuck myself on this. Should I get the new iPhone? The new iPhone came out this week. Honestly, I do remember when the iPhone itself came out. I remember before the iPhone came out, and I thought, wow, Japanese smartphone. Well, Japan had smartphones before the iPhone, and Japan's feature phones were like light years. They were like the toilets in terms of far ahead of the rest of the world. And I remember, everyone was the original iPhone and the sort of things that came after it were pretty impressive. And I didn't think they would work because they didn't come with built-in Suica. That took a long time, and that contactless payments came in because of demand from Japan. It was one of the blockers to selling more of the phones in Japan. And it didn't have a TV tuner, didn't have expansion memory cards, which again, I was used to having on my feature phone and still are not features on the iPhone, although frankly, TV tuners have just become irrelevant, I suppose. But it's kind of true that, the iPhone's kind of peaking. I've got an iPhone XS, and I used to get an iPhone like every year, and then I got it every 2 years. And now the current one I've had for 3 years. And I must admit, I probably, nowadays, the CPU on it is still great. I have no problems with lag or using any apps. The camera I actually find is awesome as well. I do know that now, probably the biggest difference if I got a new iPhone right now would be the camera. And that's the main thing that tempts me. But there again, it's a lot of money. The basic... to get an iPhone, I think it's for an iPhone Pro, but GQ costs roughly, I think for the base models, it costs 190,000 yen, $1,600 in Japan, which is about 60% of the average monthly wage in Japan. So they've gone up. This is another thing. The original iPhones were like $300, $400, and it's like 6 times that now. And it's making me think as well, as much as I do want to get a new iPhone, I almost reserved one today, and then I paused because I just thought it'd pretty much just be for the camera and maybe for the updated CPU. But there again, I am thinking like they're talking about things like adding AR glasses. There was no mention of that. But I would want a phone that works with those if they bring those out. I find that idea super interesting, although I guess that's not going to be at least until next year. Lately, I'm finding that the really fancy stuff is taking much longer to come out. And this year seemed really incremental. So I am thinking, but there again, my phone is 3 years old and I am due probably for an update. So I'm agonizing over that one. But I don't know if anyone else is planning to get the new phone. Probably if my phone was like 2 years or 1 year old, I wouldn't even consider it. And even at 3 years, I'm thinking maybe I can hold on for another year. So anyway, but they are getting crazy expensive. So some commentary in Japan on that it's actually getting to the point where even at 2 years, it's getting to be a little bit, people are holding on to them for longer. So Quint Ranked, what do people who voted for none of the above? What do the people who vote for none of the above? What do the people who vote? You mean what do they vote for? So generally, this is the point. So come election day, they're disgruntled with everybody, people, and they are why elections in Japan, I suppose, are unpredictable. they are generally a great predictor of low turnouts, and LDP always does best when there's a low turnout, because the elderly rural voters who vote for the LDP, they always show up. In fact, Taro Aso a few years ago was sort of got into trouble when he said, if you don't know who to vote for, if you're one of those none of the above voters, you should just stay home. You shouldn't vote if you really haven't made up your mind. And they know, because they know when those people turn out, they're just going to vote to screw whoever the LDP person is. And they don't really care who they vote for to do it. And this is actually convenient, because what's happening in a lot of seats this year is that the communists and the socialists and even the We Love Osaka party are all getting together, and they're saying, hey, rather than split the vote, let's just put one person up against the LDP person, so that everybody can who just wants to screw the LDP can focus all their votes on one person. And it's proving to be really effective. The problem is that it means that they have to agree not to run. And these are different parties that with different ideas. They have to help the communists get like a third of those seats or whatever, and the Osaka party get a bunch of those seats. So they can't really build up much of a presence themselves. But if it is just for screwing the LDP, that's what happens. They generally don't vote for anyone. They don't show up. But if they can be motivated to turn up to vote, they will generally vote for someone who will screw the LDP. So the opposition is trying to capture that. But the problem is, of course, the opposition really, none of the parties really actually appeal to anybody. The main appeal of the LDP, they're like... there are two types of Hanshin Tigers baseball fans in Japan. There are the people in Osaka who just love the Hanshin Tigers, and there are the people all through the rest of the country who just hate the Tokyo Yomiuri Giants so much. And the Hanshin Tigers are like the anti-Giants team, that they support them just because they're like the opposite of the Giants, not because they support the Tigers. And that's what I think a lot of the none of the above voters are. That's what they do. So it's funny. I mean, this is it. We have multi-party system where multiple parties can get representation, but people, which is like people in two-party systems, like in America, talk about how great it would be if you had proportional representation. But the problem is, it's like having a bunch of TV channels. You just end up with a bunch of mediocre TV channels. It's a little bit like that with the parties. And also part of the underlying reason for that is that the Democrats, when they got in a few years ago, were so disappointing to everyone who supported them. A lot of people still haven't forgiven them. So that's part of that anyway. AV84K, good to see in the comments. Apple is overpriced nonsense anyways. Yeah, it is. I mean, look, I admit I am locked in. I have had an Android Samsung phone for work, and I just didn't find it as good. And I'm locked into the ecosystem, all the apps, everything I'm comfortable using on the phone. I definitely don't use a Mac, but I'm a PC person. But on the phone, yeah, I'm just locked into iPhone, and I acknowledge that it is overpriced and silly. But there again, I mean, I'm still probably going to get one at some point. Quint Rankid, what do they want? Yeah, I think they're basically, honestly, I think they're anti and apathetic people who just don't care. And, generally they're the sort of people who will only make up their minds right before the election. So I suppose you'd say, actually, in New Zealand, we would call them undecideds. I guess that's what you call them in America either, which, those are valuable because I think they could potentially be seen as swing voters. But generally, of course, not voting in itself has a certain type of outcome. So it's not really clear what they want, but more often than not, they turn out when they feel like it's just to screw the government. So, yeah. Next story, interesting one here. The Ministry of Defense is looking to pay 100 YouTube influencers to help improve their image. Yeah, I could see this going wrong in so many ways. You know what? If this is executed well, I mean, again, in a country that's not even supposed to have a Ministry of Defense, that technically the Ministry of Defense is probably unconstitutional in the first place. And yes, they are obsessed with trying to improve their social acceptability and their image. So it's natural that they would, and look, they put up, ads and posters all over the place. And just like in other countries, people go and do it for, for vocational training. There's all sorts of reasons, they're in areas with high unemployment or whatever. All sorts of reasons that people join the military. And I come from a military family myself, and, but in Japan, they are fighting this image, particularly in the left, that, militaries are inherently bad, full of bad people, and that it's illegal. And, Abe talked in Parliament, although there were no specific actual, examples of this, but he suggested that, kids of self-defense force personnel faced bullying at school from the kids of communist parents who were bullying them for their parents being in an unconstitutional profession. So to stop those kids being bullied at school, we have to legalize the military and invade China. Well, he didn't say the last part exactly, but that was kind of where he was going with it. But there is this kind of perception that they have to make it a little bit less stigmatized. It is definitely stigmatized among large chunks of the population. So I kind of get it, get Hikakin and get those influencers out there, perhaps running all the awesome things that you can do in the self-defense forces. And hell, as self-defense forces go, again, having grown up in military towns in New Zealand, and the New Zealand Army, when I grew up in the 1980s, it's all Vietnam era like surplus equipment. It's like, I mean, at least in the police in the US, when they get military surplus, it's like from the most recent war. They got like the Gulf War surplus and so on. The New Zealand Army, I grew up around Iroquois helicopters, A4 Skyhawk jets flying over my school. And I thought they were cool, but it turned out they were like the outside of museums. New Zealand was just about the only country in the world still flying them and actually getting kills with them in the Persian Gulf War. But, it was just kind of remarkable that they were flying at all. So, yeah, I kind of get it. In Japan, in contrast, for all the bullying that you get at the Japanese self-defense forces, they get they were going to buy F-22s that were going to be upgraded to be like better than the American F-22s, which the Americans recognized was a problem and changed their minds. You get to fly F-35s, you get all the cool toys. The thing is that the Japanese, it's like they buy these things and then they spend millions of dollars converting them to make them less effective so that they don't appear like they can be used aggressively. But they have cool equipment here, and they're massively resourced. So I can sort of understand that. There are two risks I can really see with this, however. The first is that there are YouTubers who would love to promote the self-defense forces, and they are the ones that you should not use, because they are the ones who are responsible for people thinking that, frankly, the self-defense, there's an association between, and hell, it's probably true. There's probably a lot of right-wingers who join the self-defense forces because they're into that. And it's one of the traits of a lot of the pro-right-wing channels. They talk about, look at our wonderful military, and they talk it up. Do not give them the money though, because the problem is that the whole image that they're trying to fix is the association between the military and the far right in Japan. And there are some far right wing YouTubers, including some who have been even promoted by YouTube. I remember for a time when there were not very many people who actually knew how to use the subscribe button in Japan. And there was a time when I was in the top 50 YouTubers in Japan. I mean, can you believe that? That was like when no one was using YouTube in Japan. I was like around number 40. And I remember at that time, my channel didn't grow after that. I had Jet Daisuke, who ended up going way above me, and he's awesome. And Sakura channel, which sounds lovely. I mean, Sakura, beautiful, but that was a far right-wing channel, and I was nervous just being beside them in the YouTube rankings. I was like, hurry up and go up. So yeah, you don't want them to be your paid influencers. You don't want to find out that you've got, far right, racist, let's invade everybody channels, being promoted and funded by the Ministry of Defense. You don't want that. So, I think the other extreme is, of course, they could just go and get the Logan Paul types and fund them. And, you could see how that could go sideways as well. So, yeah, I think actually I'm not anti-Japan military at all, but I do think that it's a bit of a minefield to navigate there. I think certainly if they pick the right channels, if they pick the right ways to do this. But there again, I don't know. I mean, can you imagine like product placement from the military, like on an idol video or something like that? I mean, yeah, that would be awkward. I could imagine if they pick like gaming channels or something like that, and they could put ads in and so on. That would be probably the what I would suggest doing. But yeah, well, I don't watch AKB type channels to begin with, but that would be pretty awkward putting in military stuff in that. Although I get the feeling based on, how the Japanese military likes to have posters with idols on them and stuff. That's probably what they would go for, which would be kind of a disaster. Anyway, I think it's a high risk, possible medium reward strategy, but we'll see. It's interesting that they're going to do that. All of that said, hey, Japanese military, if you're going to pour money down on mediocre YouTube channels, I'm here, and I am open to all sponsorships. I've never had one yet, so yeah. Who knows? We'll find out, I guess. Michael, I said Michael again. Mitchell Atlas, good to see you, sir. Good to have you here in the chat. Let me go back here. We got Juan Johnson. Good to have you in here, Juan Johnson. We've got Gilden Nerd. Spelling there. Do I think that dedicated cameras are still better than phone cameras? Good question. I mean, of course, my DSLR is a better camera than my iPhone, no question. It's got an enormous sensor, it's got enormous aperture, it takes lots of light, it takes beautiful photos. But, it's heavy, and I don't want to carry it around. And if I want to snap a photo all of a sudden, it takes, time to take out of the bag and set up and turn on and aim and focus. And my iPhone, I can just snap, and it takes great photos. So in the end of the day, the old adage that the best phone you have is the one that's with you, that was kind of an excuse for the really crappy, awful iPhone cameras like back in the day. And now the iPhone cameras are quite good. But there again, they are jumping ahead. I mean, it's amazing what they're doing with that sensor technology on that small, and the fact that they're increasing the lenses to increase the light and whatnot. So my view is, dedicated cameras are better. But if I got a dedicated camera now, I'd probably get it to replace this webcam. I'd probably get something like the Sony Vlogcam, or when I get my next desktop PC, I'll get something that I can plug in to show a nice clear video picture for this. But for going out and about, honestly, the iPhone that I have in my pocket now takes such great photos, and knowing that it gets that much better, I think it's good enough that I don't need anything else. I mean, I've been tempted by things like the Insta360 Pro and things that can do things that the iPhone can't. But even then, it still is hard to beat that. So that's my opinion on that one. Mitchell Atlas, good to see you. Hey, indeed. Don't forget, you also once had an Android tablet. I did. Back when those were still viable products. Interesting story. I'm impressed that you remember I had the Toshiba tablet. Love Toshiba, love tablets. Loved my Toshiba tablet while it worked for about 3 weeks. And one day it just stopped working. And I called them up and I said, hey, what should I do? And they said, hey, send it to us and we'll fix it for you. And then a month later I called them up and said, hey, you still fixing it? They said, yeah. And I called them a month after that. They said, hey, you still fixing it? They said, yeah, you know what? If you just let us just keep it, we'll just pay you a refund. Is that okay? They basically begged me to let them pay them back because they said that there's something wrong with the motherboard. So they sent out these tablets that were basically had defective motherboards from the start. They were like from the get-go just flawed devices, and they couldn't fix it. I actually said, can't you just get me a new one? And they're like, yeah, no, we'd really prefer if you just let us refund you. And they stopped selling them. So that was a disaster, the Android tablets, and I was really excited about it. So yeah, Toshiba, a classic example of how Japanese companies just crashed and burned around tablets and smartphones after the iPhone came out. I'm impressed you remember that. That is, the Toshiba Thrive. I really liked it. It was cool. I loved the interface. I loved it when it was working, but it was for such a short time. But yeah. Thank you for reminding me. Kerberos Tenshi wouldn't mind being supported by the Blue Impulse. Yeah, the Blue Impulse is kind of cool. And again, like I say, I came from an army family from a country that had a self-defense forces of 6,000 people and an annual budget of $300 million, which sounds like a lot. But that was even paying for like the housing, and the salaries and everything. It was for Vietnam War surplus. So that was where I grew up. They're asking for a photo bomb. Gilda Nerd, almost there with the spelling. It's okay. I can see you there. They're asking for a photo bomb. Oh, I get you now. Very clever. Yes, the Defense Forces. Very nice. EDIR, when my dad was in the army, they got Garins, and it was in the 80s. At least they modernized the military, and we got to skip the G3s and go to the M16s. I'll tell you a story about the M16s, or specifically the Steyr rifles that New Zealand went to after. Yeah, this is not my story, it's my dad's story, but I heard some crazy shit when I was at home sometimes. So, one day when New Zealand switched, when they finally stopped using the M16s around 1990, they decided to update to the Steyr rifles, which are an Austrian-made. They look like, like science fiction. They're basically plastic guns, which you hold the front of the barrel, and the barrel comes back into the arm, and they've got little dinky scope on them. They look really cool, but they also look like, are those real guns? And yeah, a lot of militaries are picking those sorts of guns now. They don't even look anything like the M16s, but they're light and they're portable, and they've got a high rate of fire, and they're accurate, and that's all very good. There wasn't right after they started introducing these guns and they started replacing the M16s in New Zealand with these Austrian rifles. In Auckland, where my dad was, at that time, just before he retired, he was fairly high ranking at the time. There was an incident at a shooting range where people were trying out this new rifle, and apparently there was a safety protocol violation, and there was actually somebody standing behind the targets on the target range when somebody was shooting. And apparently the person who worked at the gun range, who was not visible, he was like behind a sheet or something, or a wall or something, was shot something like 30 times. He was shot 30 times with this new rifle, and he survived. And my dad, was a lieutenant colonel at the time. I don't know if he was interviewed or if it was if he was saying this at home. I can't remember the context exactly, but he pointed out it's very complicated for him. These were all staff from the New Zealand Army, and it was a tragedy that this person was shot at a firing range, and a miracle he survived getting shot over 30 times with this new rifle. However, at the same time, when you buy a rifle and when you start standardizing a rifle to be used by military, if anyone gets shot by it 30 times, you kind of want them to be dead. So on the one hand, he was relieved that the poor person, the victim in the accident, was safe. On the other hand, he sort of made them think, was this a bad purchase? That's military. That's hell. Sponsor me, YouTube. That's why you can't put me on there. So yeah, that was a thing that happened, EEDIR, in the New Zealand case. Never got to fire an M16. Sometimes they let kids go and do that at school. I went to some shooting competitions, and I'm pretty sure I lost a percentage of my hearing doing that. But yeah, used to go out hunting and stuff like that. Bit of fun. Cobras Tenchi, there's a lovely former JSDF YouTuber who makes interesting videos. Well, they've got such great equipment in Japan. And Ishiba, who's actually not running for PM, he's kind of famous as like a military hardware nerd. He was like begging to be the Minister of Defense, and he was Minister of Defense for a time. But yeah, I mean, Japan's got like cool stuff. So yeah, and by the way, I get a thrill. I mean, you don't actually see self-defense force, particularly in Tokyo. You almost never see. So for me, I get a bit of a thrill when I see the trucks and jeeps. And the whole time I've been in Japan, I could count on my hands the number of times I've seen self-defense force cars driving around. And to me, they're like cool, right? They're like brand new, and they flash. So yeah, I'm totally into that. The J-Vlog, good to see you. Salutations indeed. AV84K, did I hear about the new surveillance bill Australia recently accepted? Maybe not. I mean, Australia's had a few of those, right? I mean, yeah, Australia honestly is getting a little bit dystopian lately. Mitchell Atlas, yeah, I think I recall hearing the same thing. I recall it being kind of cringy, but yeah, and I get the feeling that's the direction that they would go in with YouTubers if they went and did that. But I think that would be a mistake, personally. But there again, I mean, hell, maybe it's what works the best. I mean, they shouldn't be taking my advice anyway. Cobras Tenchi's AKB48's Bokutachi wa Tatakawanai with JSDF ads on it. Oh, there you go. Bai McNeil, good evening. Good evening to you, sir. By the way, Bai's been like killing on the bicycle lately. Dude, he's been like, from home and back, but he's been adding up to like circumnavigating Japan. You're logging up some serious miles there. I am impressed at that. And yeah, Quint Ranked, it could be better, but it can be better to wound than to kill. Makes the enemy use raw resources. Yeah, I don't think that's what the Austrians were thinking when they made the Steyr rifle. And honestly, again, if you watch the Schwarzenegger, there's an Austrian. Imagine in Commando, if every person, if you had to shoot everyone 30 times and they were only really badly wounded. I mean, the movie would have taken 12 hours. Wouldn't work. Yeah, it's tough being in the military. I'll tell you another funny story. My dad, he was in special forces for a time when I was a kid, so he was kind of badass. Definitely. I didn't get the badass genes, and that's okay. There's another father. Another father. That's awkward. My dad had a cousin who has the same surname, who's also in the military. He's an engineer, and apparently one time somebody called him up and started chewing his ear off about, he mistaken my dad for my uncle, for my dad's cousin, who's an engineer, and started to like complain about all the stuff. And he said, "You got the wrong Hiko, you got the wrong person." And they're like, no, it's you. I know it's all this and that. And apparently my dad then lost his shit and said, "No, you want the Mr. Hiko that helps people. I'm the Mr. Hiko that kills people." That was a self-introduction. So yeah, although obviously not if he's using an Austrian rifle. So, that was the problem. The J-Vlog, they're in Sasebo, one hand counting for the military. That one hand counting for the military would be used up in 5 minutes. Well, that's it. If you're in the right parts of the country, you're surrounded by it. But definitely in Tokyo, they definitely keep it hidden. So, yeah. Anyway, next story. Interesting one here. It's come out that they're looking to get the digital. At the moment, you can get like an A4. In fact, I'm not sure if it's actually the vaccine passport that you get. You have the official record, which is an A4 piece of paper with stickers all over it that you get from the council, which is what I've got with my 2 shots. And you can actually go and apply for a formal vaccination certificate, which is, I think, what you use for purposes to prove, for example, for international travel or whatnot. But the government is now openly talking about doing what a lot of other countries are doing, about having a vaccine passport, with the idea being, for example, even today they were talking about Kishida, one of the candidates for the next PM, was saying, we're going to do go-to travel 2.0 better than the first one. I was kind of, dude, that's exactly like why Suga's resigning, because that was such a mistake. But he was talking about, we're gonna boost it again, because again, tourism's taken such a hard hit with coronavirus, and we're gonna link it that you're only gonna get the benefits if you've got the vaccine passport. Lots of other things, for example, talking about reopening bars and restaurants and karaoke places, but making it mandatory, or basically trying to foster access and reopening and travel again by having these vaccine passports associated with it. So they're building up to the idea of having this digital phone app-based digital passport, which you'll be able to use in December as a way to promote everybody getting vaccinated. And that's good enough, and I think it's a good idea, frankly, and I think it's a good way to encourage people who are on the fence to get it done. However, the government has announced the other day that the other thing they've been trying to encourage everybody to do is to sign up for My Number. The whole point being with My Number, once you're on the My Number system and you link your bank account information and everything to it, it gives the government a way to better track everyone across different sort of government systems and make sure that they're taxing the living crap out of you. And it's one thing about Japan. The taxes are already reasonably low. The sales tax is like, on a global scale, it's quite low. 10%, but 8% in some circumstances. Income taxes are quite low. Inheritance tax is super high. But again, a lot of work in Japan is still under the table. There still is an awful lot of cash work in Japan, including like work of the night and so on. And basically there's a large cash economy, and the government's just decided, rather than increasing taxes, which is kind of politically suicidal, they're just going to try to tax more efficiently, to collect more taxes that aren't being collected, and they want to use the My Number system for that. So they're actually saying they've decided to make it mandatory to have a My Number card, or My Number, basically a social security number, which is not mandatory. They've only just rolled this out a couple of years ago in Japan, but you're going to need a My Number card in order to get the vaccine passport, which you'll need to be able to get into a bunch of things. So they've decided to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, and not only try to incentivize vaccines, but incentivize people to be tracked and taxed more. So that's kind of an interesting one. A lot of people reacting adversely to that, particularly if you're a foreigner. I heard, I don't know if this is true, but I heard people saying that if you get a My Number card, you need to renew that along with your Gaijin card when your Gaijin card gets renewed, for your visa renewals. I'm not sure if that's the case, but apparently it is a pain, and it takes a few days to get from the city council. It's not easy to get hold of, so they're not making it easy. But in any case, it looks like Japan is going to be rolling out vaccine passports, so that is interesting. Next story. A bit of discussion this week. Mounting frustration. There is a situation which I haven't talked an awful lot about, but the situation of there are so many foreign residents of Japan, permanent residents. In fact, this doesn't apply so much to permanent residents, I don't think. I think permanent residents, like citizens, have been able to get back into Japan, going through the quarantine rules set up for Japanese people. But for other types of residents, including people on student visas or work visas or whatever, who are outside of Japan or waiting to come to Japan, not as tourists, but to live, or people who live here and were outside of the country when the travel restrictions came on, there are people who have been waiting now for like nearly a year and a half. And this has significant consequences. This affects people at my work who have been waiting to get into Japan for all of this time. A large amount of students and so on, a large amount of people who want to come and work in Japan. And Japan is just basically blocked. They are not allowing entry of of people with a right of residence in Japan. It's as part of the coronavirus controls, and certainly if there's a state of emergency or whatever, I think it did make sense, particularly when there weren't vaccinations or whatever available. It made sense in the beginning to have travel restrictions. But, now that people can prove that they're vaccinated and so on, and again, Japanese immigration was able to handle over 100,000 people coming in and leaving Japan within the 1 month period of the Olympics, and now that's done. So now there's no one else coming into Japan, and these were all foreigners, and people are getting more frustrated now. People have been waiting for a long time and have had their lives held up by this, at seeing athletes and musicians and DJs getting in and out of the country on sort of one-off exemptions, and people saying, well, wait a minute, I live in Japan and I'm not allowed back in. And this has really been going on for such a long time now, and it does seem increasingly incongruous, given that people can prove that they're vaccinated, given that people can, that the immigration system, which had its capacity taken up with the Olympics and so on, that is now over, and now that capacity is free. It really does seem, incongruous that they can't start to let legitimate residents of Japan into the country. And I get that maybe they can't handle letting them all in at once, but even just starting with business travel, starting it in a phased way, it is happening really slow. In other countries, based on, again, vaccine passport-based travel, Japan Japan is like lobbying to have other countries recognize Japanese vaccine passports to allow Japanese to travel to other countries. Japan is not recognizing any other country yet. And the assumption was that they were holding off for the Olympics to be over, but the Olympics are over. And there's a lot of people whose lives have been messed up by this, and it still isn't changing yet. So, on the one hand, I think I've been kind of patient calling for this, but I'd say now it is getting ridiculous that there are people whose lives are just being in total limbo for so long, unnecessary, for no really good reason. I mean, the way quarantine works in Japan is, people, I think you have to spend 3 days at a airport, at a hotel near the airport, and then you can just go and stay vaccinated. You can stay quarantined at your own sort of house, which you can bet that most Japanese people have not been following properly. Japan is now starting to stand out as being out of place on this, and at the same time that they're worried about losing the foreign workers that they need, they're not letting any of them back in. I think most people don't understand the extent of disruption from this. And sure, there's a general, wasn't it safer just not to let anyone in? But I think now the population is more than 50% vaccinated, and I'll show you a graph soon, but going up at an impressive rate. Like, the country is going to be one of the most vaccinated countries in the world by November. Singapore hit a threshold, by the way, the other week, where they actually decided that the population was now, they said once the population is over 70% vaccinated, they were no longer going to do lockdowns. They were just going to then live with corona. So if you chose not to get vaccinated, you'd be rolling the dice with the disease, but they weren't going to lock down society anymore. They would accept that people, are sufficiently protected. So, yeah, Japan's going to be getting to these thresholds really, really soon. And again, I think it's time that that the immigration department starts looking at this and they start actually lifting these. So it's looking pretty bad at this point, at least out of place in terms of being too late. Back into the comments, the J-Vlog, that's the Sasibo comment. I saw that one. We got Odie Jr. Boom, good to have you in here. Super late, but no problem at all. Good to see you as always. Ilrak 299, good evening. Late to the party, only staying briefly tonight. You have my number card, 10 years, wow. And nothing was said about renewing. Okay, so I don't know. That seems screwy to me as well, honestly. So, yeah. You've had a My Number card for 10 years. Have they been around that long? Yeah. I have a My Number piece of paper, and I know my number. And I don't know the point of getting the card with the chip in it, but I guess we'll have to do it, and that's fine. But it just seems a hassle. If the renewing thing the renewal thing sounded like ridiculousness, but that's reassuring that you did not have to go through that. So thank you for sharing that. EDIR in Denmark, taxes are high. We run almost everything electronically, which means the state compares your expenses to the norm and finds out who is cheating taxes. Lesson: keep cash. Yeah. Well, of course, Denmark qualifies as a Scandinavian country, I think, and they're sort of famous for that. I've heard about like can of Coke costs $8 in Norway. I think that's for different reasons, actually, but well, there you go. That's what they're moving to in Japan. I mean, Japan at the moment, everything is analog, everything is all isolated by different government departments, and a lot of people use cash. It's so it's why elderly people get targeted for like burglaries and scams and stuff like that, because they'll typically run inside and get $40,000 out of the closet. Unfortunately, they people still they don't trust the government or banks, with some good reason. Mitchell Atlas, you got your news iDo card in July, and the only update needed from My Number was to change its expiration date to match the expiration date of the card. It took 10 minutes to QX show in and out. That sounds reasonable, and congrats on that. So there we go. The J-Vlog, that My Number card dropped your wife's health insurance from 24,000 yen down to zero. Yes, zero. So there we go. I guess lasts for 10 years. That is interesting. Yeah, I mean, they did a big push for people to get My Number cards right when the pandemic was happening, and it caused huge queues and crowding at city councils. I've just had no reason to go to the city council, but I guess I will. I mean, I don't want to go near crowds if I can avoid it, but I'm quite happy to get the card if that's what's required. I'm making good progress tonight. I might actually make it on time. How many more? I think I'm pretty close to it. Anyway, this is a cool story from this week. This is the SpaceX Inspire 4. Oh, that's going to play a video. Get out of here. That's going to ruin the whole thing. So that is talking about the SpaceX Inspiration 4 mission, which I mean, look, I'm wearing the shirt. Yeah, I've always been a bit of a space nerd. I would love to go into space. So yeah, I must admit, I do watch the SpaceX launches live on YouTube, and finding out that there was this, I must admit, it also shows that when you have Branson and Bezos with their sort of competition to get tourists into space, fee-paying passengers into space, and Branson sort of snuck in there a few days early with the space plane that got up into orbit. Well, didn't get up into orbit at all. Actually, it just got technically into space at about 80 kilometers, and then a few days later, Blue Origin got past the Kármán line of 100 kilometers, and then came back down again in a few minutes. But then SpaceX, they took a bit more time, and then they just let 4 people fly the whole thing themselves and go and spend 3 days in orbit, eating pizza and flying around and then splashing down. And that was cool. And, yes, it's a bit of a billionaire game and all of that sort of stuff. But at the same time, I mean, this is just setting up for the idea of us being able to take trips up there. And I watched the Netflix series. They've been making a documentary about the whole thing. And I must admit, the way that they went about the Inspiration 4 mission, the way that they picked the people, sort of some random people in some ways. There's one person in particular they picked from the child cancer hospital that they were specifically looking to promote, people to make donations to as part of the mission. They picked a pediatric, I think, assistant nurse for that. So she was like the youngest American, not the youngest person ever to go into space, but she didn't know anything about space. And there was a moment in the series where when because they were sponsoring the hospital, they asked could someone from the hospital be in the mission, and they nominated this person who didn't know anything about anything for this. And apparently the first thing she asked was, "Oh, am I going to get to go to the moon?" And apparently she told her brother this, and her brother was like the going to space camp, like the genuine real deal like space nerd. And as a space nerd brother myself, I could just imagine if I found out that my sister was going to space, and the first thing that she reacted and said was, "Oh, does that mean I go to the moon?" Yeah, he said, it showed his reaction, sort of saying, no, I'm pretty sure that wouldn't be the case. I know what his internal monologue was. it probably wouldn't be appropriate for the camera. But yeah, it was actually, it's good storytelling. It was moving. The way that they went is super cool, and it made me like, I want to do that. So really cool that they've done it. I am loving what SpaceX. I'm loving that there's some competition around all of this. It's just great that space stuff is moving forward at the moment. I know there are big problems in the world, but I do think it's something that, you know, humanity should be doing. Then it's good to have something to, you know, to aspire to and reach for, and that's what this is all about. I thought it was super cool. So personally, I very much enjoyed that. Yeah, we've got people saying hi there. I'm going to move on to the next one. The current state of coronavirus numbers. Today was down to like 500 something new cases, which again normally would still be a disaster. The threshold for the state of emergency is a 7-day average of 500 or less. We're still at a 7-day average at the moment of 1,384. So it is still a long way from being in fact, no, right now the 7-day average is 815. The 7-day average the previous week was 1,300. So it is coming down a lot. It is coming down, in fact, 58% per week. So it's a good trend, although it's not quite under the, and even if it does get under in terms of new cases, there are still a large number of, relatively high number of deaths, about 20 deaths per day. So the serious cases, the hospitals are still under a lot of pressure. So, you know, we're probably about 3 weeks to a month to being out of the state of emergency at the moment. But it is getting better, and that is good to see. That said, there's going to be another wave, and the only thing that we can really do to mitigate it is just having vaccinations as much as possible before the next one. But like last week, it's actually now getting below 1,000, which is encouraging. And this is what's most encouraging. Really interesting graph. You can see that line down the bottom there, you know, Japan lingering when everyone else is doing very well, and then it just shot up, and now Japan, at least compared to Italy, France, Spain, Germany, United Kingdom, in terms of per capita vaccinations, is now like actually way up there in terms of them being issued, and even in terms of like you know, in terms of reach throughout the entire population, still a long way to go, and still slower than the rest of the world by a few months. But we're going to get there, and I get the feeling, actually, that in the end, Japan's probably going to have higher vaccination rates than other countries. And I hope this gives Japan the confidence to reopen the borders and whatnot very, very soon and get all that stuff done. So that is all the topics. Boom, I'm on time. I am, by the way, I've been continuing my watching movies challenge on Netflix that I took up for work. And yesterday I watched Get Smart, which wasn't great, but it was, oh man, this week I watched Dinner for Schmucks. That was awful. That was Steve Carell. Get Smart was a better Steve Carell movie, but it wasn't great, but it was what you would expect. I watched Vivo, the singing Cuban monkey. That was not good. I don't know. I guess you just have to be in the mood to watch that, and I wasn't. Tonight I'm watching Blood Red Sky. I'm halfway through it at the moment, and that's pretty good. I'm enjoying that. It's in German, but it's actually, I'm enjoying that movie. So yeah, as always, hope you enjoyed the topics. And remember, please like if you like. Please subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. And yeah, the J-Vlog. Did I talk about that lady in Chiba who lost her baby because the hospital was full from COVID patients? I did talk about that when it happened a while ago. That was awful. That actually put me off even following news for a while when that happened. Cobra Tenchi. So the Japanese government will be like, no state of emergency for Christmas. That's your present. Not so sure about that. Well, apart from the fact no one here cares about Christmas. You have to work on Christmas. The other problem is, of course, if you look at the graph, that we came out of the last state of emergency and we were back in another one like in less than a month. So I think the way that the timing on that would work is we would be out of this one in like mid-October, and we'd probably be back into another state of emergency unless the vaccinations really improve things. We'd probably, in fact, just the way that these waves go, we're probably going to be back in another state of emergency in December. And it would be pretty hard to see us coming out of that by New Year's. But we'll see. If the vaccinations really work, then we're going to be in a better place. So yeah. Anyway, I'm gonna sign off tonight. Everybody have a good week. Stay safe. Stay safe from COVID. Do sensible things. And yeah, Juan Johnson, thank you for the thumbs up. Thank you for the likes. Remember to like if you like. Thank you always, Aaron, for the awesome moderation and the edited videos and so on. I know you got a busy time. Christmas is date night. It's work followed by dates. In Japan, indeed. It is like the third Valentine's Day. Yeah, have a good week, everybody. Stay safe. Follow me on Twitter if you want to keep up with this stuff during the week and you want to message me and reach out and do all that good stuff. And kai kitano, peace. Boom. Have a good one, everyone. End stream. Boom.